What's up, family? I'm back at it again with the recipe videos. We're profiling beautiful cuts of beef from Vermont Wagyu. This week we have a silent but deadly cut, the Flatiron Steak. The Flatiron Steak, it doesn't have the big old bone coming out of it. It's really unassuming. It's not 8 inches thick like every other cut of beef. It's super thin, but it's super tasty. For this cut of beef, what we did was that we heavily seasoned it with salt and pepper, and then we put it in the fridge. We let it sit uncovered, and we totally forget about it for like 4 days. After that, what we have is a nice concentrated, dried out cut of beef. Just rub some oil on the outside, and suddenly we have ourselves a beautiful 20-minute meal. So come cooking. I have my cast iron pan warming up. It's on a high heat right now. All right, so I'm just gonna slice my onion. I'm gonna give it some salt, a little bit of oil, and I'm gonna put in here one of my favorite spices, Garam Masala. Next thing I have is my piece of beef. This is the Vermont Wagyu Flatiron Steak. I salted it, peppered it, put it in the fridge. I let it sit uncovered in the fridge for about 3 or 4 days. So you see that it's darkened a little bit, and the texture is hardened up a little bit, and that's good. It means that my flavors inside are concentrated. A mini dry aging situation. And I also have some beef tallow. Since this is a little bit dry on the outside, I'm just going to rub it a little bit with the beef fat. And so you see in my pan, I just put a tiny bit of oil, not as much as I usually would put when searing a steak, because I'm rubbing this with oil. My pan is smoking and ready to go, so I'm going to drop my steak inside. And this is going to cook very fast. I'm going to press it down just to make sure that parts of my steak are making contact with the pan. Alright, it's been barely 1 minute. I'm going to flip this. And once again, make sure that my steak is really making contact with the pan. Alright, so it's been about another minute. I'm going to take out my steak, let it rest. So I have my steak on a plate here. It's just going to rest up a little bit. We see that as a wonderful crust, looking nice and sizzly. Now with that oil, I'm going to add in my seasoned onions. I'm just going to spread them around, do your thing with this. And you would cook this just really depending on how you like onions. If you like onions with a bite and some spice, you don't have to cook it as long. But if you like your onions more tender, you can let this rock for as long as you want. So now that my onions have started cooking a little bit, I'm going to add some sauce here. This is a Korean inspired sauce that I made for another recipe. I'm just going to add it to just give the onions some liquid and more flavor. Alright, these onions are ready. I'm just going to put them into this bowl. And so, I mean, like, the onions actually took longer to cook than the steak did. Now I put the onions in the bowl. I'm just going to drop in a couple sprigs of parsley, just kind of tear it up. This is some curly parsley. I'm just tearing up with my hands, and I'm just going to toss it. I'm just looking to lightly wilt the parsley in the heat here, and I have a couple more, and I have a little bit more parsley on the side here for later, for garnish. At this point, I'm going to taste it. And it tastes good. It's well seasoned, it's flavorful. You taste the garam masala, but you get the sweetness from the Korean inspired sauce. So here on my plate, what I have is just some leftovers. I have a Cous Cous stir fry that I made. You can pair this steak obviously with anything that you want. You could put it in a wrap, you can put it in a taco. So I'm slicing this at a diagonal against the grain to nice thin slices. And so like when my knife enters my steak, it's at an angle. I'm going to take some of these middle pieces right on top of the stir fry, spread it out. Have all my onions right here in the middle. Finish it up with some curly parsley. And here is our plate. Vermont Wagyu Flatiron Steak, seasoned, dry aged in the fridge for about 3-4 days, seared and topped with some sauteed onions and fresh parsley, and paired with a leftover couscous stir fry.